Hi, welcome to GMakes. I'm George, and this is my tutorial, kind of walkthrough more on how to make a fully procedural Christmas tree in Blender 3.0 using geometry nodes. This method is based on Default Cube's Wreath tutorial, both parts 1 and part 2, where he makes the baubles and everything and does the shading a little bit better. I watched those tutorials. I made a wreath, which maybe might be up on screen or maybe I'll show at the end. But I want to make a Christmas tree. Wreaths are great and I love them, but it's Christmas. I want to make a Christmas tree just to celebrate. Maybe not use for anything, but I want to make a Christmas tree. And I couldn't find any way to do that. What didn't involve modeling or using there's the free add-on that's in Blender, which is like plant. I can't remember what it's called. It's with plants and stuff, and you can make like a little Douglas fir and stuff, and that's all great. But again, I want to be able to change things really easily, keep it fairly quick, and not have to model a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, just kind of be able to change things. So I'm like, oh, I actually want a skinny tree, or I want it thicker, or I want more needles, or whatever I want to do. I want more tinsel. I want more ornaments. I want less ornaments. I want more lights. I just want to be able to have more control over it. So after some experimentation, basing everything off of Default's Cube method, which I recommend watching those videos, parts 1 and 2 of his Wreath tutorial. If you haven't already and that hasn't driven you looking how to make a Christmas tree, I recommend watching those just because he does a really good job of more quickly explaining the basis for this. And the basis for this tree is going to be the same as his wreath, a curve that then has stuff applied to it. It's just that there's a lot more to instance. So feel free to kind of skip around if you get the gist of what's going on. I should have time codes down below for the different parts of everything. And yeah, so let's go ahead. And I should also have the iCard will also have Default Cube's tutorials, the first one, linked up there as well, which I recommend watching again if you haven't already. So with all of that said and out of the way, let's get going and make a procedural geometry node based Christmas tree in Blender 3.0. All right. So we're gonna learn how to make this kind of tree, which you've probably seen the renders up on screen already, the little animation I did, and then the still render of it. As you can see, it looks, it's not 100% realistic, and as you zoom in and you can probably see the still render, you can tell that it's not like photorealistic, and that's just because I didn't want to have to model anything at all. So all of this is procedural, all this is with geometry nodes, every last bit, and a little bit of texturing. And if we go to cycles, you'll see it looks pretty good with an HDRI and some lights set up and everything. Looks pretty darn good. Now we'll go back to material mode. But yeah, so that's that, and that's just base cubes. So basically, as you can see down here, this is the node tree, geometry nodes. And so this isn't going to be me going through and building this step. I have it all built out. I'm just going to be connecting things as we go and seeing how they layer on top of each other. So a good understanding of how to use Blender is recommended. But this will be pretty quick, and just the idea of taking, as I mentioned, Default Cube's way of making a wreath and putting that into a tree form. Because I wanted to make a tree, and I didn't see any other way of his way of using geometry nodes to make a tree, so this is what I figured out. And this could be used for a couple other things, and of course there's things you could do to make it more realistic, like actually model pine needles and use those as an instance. As you'll see, we're going to just use grids, just use planes. Actually model out lights, as we're just going to use cones for little spots of light. And you can make different collections, that way they can twinkle and you can animate them. But this is just a real quick way. So we're just going to get right into it. So basically, I just basically spawned in another cube to set this geometry node up, and this is just a new setup. We'll name this xmas tree tutorial. That's an actual tutorial. Tutorial. There we go. So this is now my base one. This one I had before was my original one, and I just basically copied it and then disconnected everything. So to start, we'll drag, we'll disconnect this too. This is the final way it's going to end up. We'll move some things around. This is just how we can get the geometry in there. So we'll start here, and I have these nicely labeled. So this is the spiral. Yes, this starts not with a cone, which is what I first tried to do, but with a spiral. Because, I mean, a Christmas tree is like a stick, and then it has a whole bunch of levels going up that slowly get smaller. And the spiral is the same way. It spirals around until it gets to the top. So that's what we're going to use. And it also starts as a curve, and then we can modify it more and turn that into a mesh. So that's very nice. And then later when we add the tinsel, we basically just do the same thing, which is going to be nice. We're going to have a spiral built in. So we start with this spiral. We add that there, and here we are. You can see it in all its beautiful glory. It's a pretty tight spiral. I modify these, so here's what I have it set to. Resolution's the same, I didn't change that, but I upped the rotation a whole bunch, and I made it the end radius 0, so we get this nice point. The start radius, I think the standard is 2. It might be 1, but these are the settings that work for me, and you can change yours. And that's the nice thing about this being procedural, is you can change any of this at any time, and it will update. And I made the height 4 meters, just because that's the ratio I like. But again, you can do what you want. You can make a real skinny one if you want to, a real skinny Christmas tree. I like the big one. So that's our basis for this whole thing. And how do we get that now to look, to have geometry that we can use? Well, we're going to do a basic curve to mesh right here. So if we set that out, nothing changes. Don't forget about that right now. So we're going to have a circle as our spiral to give it thickness. And this is kind of what the wreath method is. It uses 2 circles to make a torus. And this is also, I kind of came about this method, so I wanted to make whipped cream. And the same thing, I just used like a star in that instance. But you could also use a circle and just change the number of sides. So if you make like toothpaste or ice cream or something, anything cone shaped. So that goes in the profile curve. And now look at this. We got ourselves a fun little cone. Of course, it doesn't really meld into itself, and it's not pointing at the top, but it's a nice little cone. And so that's the basis again. Now we have a mesh right here. But I want to be able to give this a little bit more, and this is also Default Cube does for his torus, give this a little more variability, because a tree, all the branches aren't the same length in a Christmas tree. So to help with that, I set the curve radius of this first initial spiral over here, and then we're going to do that with a noise texture, which is right here. We take that factor and put that into the value, and we have it set to smoother step, so that things melt better together. And we take that result. First of all, I gotta show that's a map range, so we'll get into that. But this is the first. Just set this factor from a noise texture into the radius. Now you see we have a nice variability, and I've changed this a lot. So I've made it's 4D off the bat instead of it starts as 3D. I changed it to 4D because we have this value right here, which is the seed value of it, which we'll get into. Again, that makes this thing procedural. If you really want to make a whole bunch of these and just copy and use the same node setup, you can easily make them look all different, or just keep messing with settings until you get one you like. The scale I've put way down, or just a little bit down, but I've taken down the detail to 0, the roughness 0, and the distortion 0, just to get this kind of smoothness. And this is, again, being procedural. You can change all this and make it how you want it. But because I don't want it fully like this much variability necessarily, I'm going to do it before. So I'm going to run that factor through a map range node and put that into the radius. And there we go. Now I want this to be full. And so I have the max as 1 and the minimum is 0.8. So that means it will only vary the thickness between the values of 0.8 and 1. It won't go any smaller or any larger. And again, I have it set to smoothest step to make it smoother. And then that's all going out to curve to mesh and geometry. So this cone's looking pretty good. But the thing is, it's the same thickness all the way through. That even though there's variability, the base thickness is that 0.8 to that 1. So as it gets to the spiral, the tube that's making the mesh doesn't get tinier, which is going to be not too terrible problem, but it means we don't get a point at the top. And also, as we start to spawn things into it, it means the amount of things spawning on that 2 won't change as it goes up, which isn't how actual trees work, because the things get smaller and the fewer get spawned and blah, 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 blah. There's fewer branches because the trunk gets thinner and all that. So what I have then is we have this curve parameter, which will just say as it gets up to the top, just kind of the distance, it will get pointy or something. That's the basis of how I understand it. Anyway, we're going to take that curve parameter, and we want this in the radius, because if you look there, look at that. Now that's nice and pointy right there. See if we just go back to the noise. It's doing, well, it's doing the opposite. There we go. That's at the bottom. That's what it is. It sets it to the bottom. You see how it gets nice and thin down here until it vanishes right there. That's what we want, but we want it at the top. And of course, you could mess around with, you could reverse this. Well, that reverses in the direction of the spiral, not the thing. So you don't want to do that. But so I'm going to put the map range back in there. And so we have this nice thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this parameter. And yes, I just accidentally clicked this multiply into place. We're going to use that to mix this curve parameter. You know, this color ramp where I've switched the colors. Normally black's over here, 0 and 1. I've just switched them. You could use an inverse node to do the same thing, but I like this because I can inverse it and I can get control over how much. And I'm going to take that color and put it into the color 2. And then this is just mix RGB. And I just found that multiply kind of gives me the results I like. Again, procedural, so you can kind of mix it. So you can see now it's getting thinner at the top, not at the bottom anymore. It's not a huge difference, like if we take this off. But you can see it now gets thinner as we get up. And it's just minimal, but you know, it helps. And you can change the factor. You have it to like 0.2. So you can really change it up. So it's just a slight, let's make it a little more. So let's make it like 0.35. Just so it gets a little more mix up there. And that's only, you can see this is if you want it really sparse. But we'll go 0.35. Let's go 0.4. We'll see how that works out. Just to get a little bit more of a point at the top. Anyway, so this is our spiral. This is the basis for the whole tree. Look at that. Look how beautiful that looks. But now we're going to move on to making our pine needles. So this is what we're going to spawn all over the tree. So we're going to get rid, it's still there because it's geometry node, but now we're going to work on our pine needles. And this is the first of the same thing we're going to be doing for everything. This is just making points randomly distributed and then instancing an object or geometry onto those points. So the basis for this is we start with a cylinder. Look at that beautiful cylinder right there. Oh yeah, I have this ground in right here, which I suppose I can hide. Look at all these lights and everything. It's a little busy, so let's actually just hide all of that. Get the camera out of here too. All right, I have this, the camera's tracked too. All right, that's a little bit better. So this is just the basis for a pine needle. I've made a cylinder. I've set the fill type to none, so that means it has neither cap, it's just a tube, an empty tube all the way through. And that's going to be real nice just because it saves us in geometry, and also there's no pine needles sticking up on the top or bottom. Again, nothing mess with these two. The radius I made very thin. I made it, you can make it even thinner if you want. Depth I've kept the same, I believe. So that's the basis, and now what we're going to do is we're also going to spawn in a grid, which is just a plane. So this grid, again, I've kept the size Y the same. You could keep one of these the same or make it slightly longer or whatever. Again, do what you want to do. And I made this 0.1. This is actually, I think, a little thick. I kept it because I didn't really super care. I'm going to make this actually half of this, and we'll see how that turns out. Again, you can change this at any time because it's a geometry node and you're not actually modeling anything, so it's nothing set in stone, which is really nice. So I'm going to change that to 0.505 meters, see just how that works out. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this cylinder, and we're gonna distribute points. We're gonna actually plug that into this distribute points on faces, and we're gonna put that into the geometry. I'm in material setup, so you can't see. There we are, shader, and you see there's a whole bunch here. The standard size is 10. I have this set to 350. You can set even more. I just have it set to random because I don't care if these kind of clip through each other. We just want a lot of geometry in here. And this is where you also could get more realistic. Besides using a grid, you can model a pine needle and use that as we take this and we instance on points. And now nothing's happening because we have no instance. But that's where our little grid comes in. And now look we got pine needles. They're all in a stack, but we got them. This is where you could pick an instance or put a geometry node and use geometry of an object and plug that in. Or you can make cylinders you could make this a little more realistic if you wanted to. But we want to save a little bit of computing power, and for me, planes are fine. Much like in the Wreath, planes are fine. Unless you're having it there or really close up on it and super in focus, no one's really going to notice. And it's going to save us a lot of processing power. So we got this, and now we want to give it rotation. This is the same thing from the default tutorial, default cube tutorial, so I'm not going to super go through it. But we just have an align Euler to vector for this rotation. Plug it into rotation and plug that into rotation. And now look at and so what I have this set, I think the default's X. Don't want that because that looks real weird. Same with Y. It's just lining all the Y, so we set it to Z. And to add a little bit of that variation of needles, I have this factor down from 1. We'll put that to an even 0.8. That's even a little, I think I had point like 8.87, a little 0.85. And yeah, that just adds a little more of that variability that you see in actual pine needles. And you can up this count even more to like 400, but I'm going to keep it 350. So that's our pine needle, which will also be the basis for our tinsel. So that's really nice. We just make one thing and we can use it for 2 separate things. It's all about coloring and distribution and size and all that. So we go back, we have our spiral. So how do we get this tinsel, these pine needles, onto this spiral? That is all this setup right here. Tree is what I have called it. And it's the same thing over and over. We have a distribute points on faces, which we'll put on there. Look at all these points. Look at them. Again, I have this set to 200 points all over this. And you can see it gives us that little bit. Now I see, like, if we take off this multiply again and just do that, we lose the thing with why I have this curve parameter in there is because you lose some of that cone shape as you distribute points. Like, it's very clouded up there as opposed to keeping that pointedness. And again, you could ramp this up as things get more sparse, but we're going to put that back down to we'll go 0.3. Or I think it's going to be 0.4. We'll do 0.4. So that's why I have this curve parameter mixing with this noise texture. Anyway, so we have a whole bunch of points. Awesome. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to instance those points. And we're going to put that out. But we have nothing to instance it, and that's because our instances are going to be our pine needles. Just take a little bit to load in. Blah, blah, blah. Please don't crash. I'm going to save. This is my original project file, so I'm just not to save as. I have it saved, Christmas tree. And now it's being really, I don't quite understand how this works. I've explained I've watched a couple things, whatever, so I'm not here to explain things to you. I'm just here to show you how to make a Christmas tree. But my computer gets real slow when I just have a whole bunch of instances like this. So I have to use realize instances down here. And I put that in there, which turns these points into actual geometry. And now my computer is fine with it. I don't know how that works because from my understanding, until they're realized, they're just like stored. They're like not actually there, so they should be faster. But for some reason, my computer likes them being realized. Maybe that's reverse of how it is. If anyone wants to explain it to me in the comments or anywhere in a nice way, I will gladly listen. But it's not super important to me. I just know that realizing instances makes my computer not hate when I have a whole bunch of geometry on here. Anyway, I have these set to 200. Again, random. I don't care if these kind of clip through each other. That's kind of what I want, just to make it look like a lot. But you see they're all pointing in a weird direction. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the pine needles. Align Euler to vector. Rotation, rotation. And I have this set to Y. X or Y works here. So that's kind of to preference. I like Y, and then for the tinsel I do X just to give them a little more differentiation. But you can see now it looks more like a Christmas tree. I also have the scale set way down. I have it set to 0.1. Let's see, because if you have them just as a normal scale, they're going to be huge. Yeah, you can get this big old weird thing. So you can find I have 0.1. Just because that's what worked, I thought looked best, but you can always modify that. Again, it's all procedural. So we're going to take that, those lovely points, and we're going to take that rotation. Again, I have a little bit of that rotation, so they're not flat. They have a little bit of tilt, just because that's how pine needles are. They all kind of tilt up. You can do even more of that if you wanted that kind of tree. But now again, these are all the same. They all look very uniform, even on the distance. They are all the same length. So I'm going to take another noise texture. Again, this one has a little more detail and roughness. Just that's what I figured out I liked. I'm going to plug that through a color ramp because I don't want... This is for size is what I'm using this for. I'm going to plug this into the scale. And you'll see. So I have this as 0.1. Like this color right here, you can see, is at 0.08. So it's even smaller. And my max, instead of being 1, I have that set to 0.434. And you can see that just gave me even a little more. You have some of these branches that are much more sticking out, and some that are not. We have a couple holes because I made the leaves smaller, and some other stuff going on, but that's all right. We'll see how it looks. We can always spawn in more. This one's a little more sparse, maybe. But yeah, so again, that's just the noise texture, and you can change this. Like maybe I don't like how this sticks out fully. So this color ramp in here is like the map range node, which I guess you could also use. For the scale, I want them to be between these two instances. I just, for some reason, used a color ramp here instead of a map range, because I think that's just how my brain wanted to do it. A map range would probably, from what I can tell, would work the same way. Just saying, I want the size between these 2 points. For whatever reason, I just liked this way of doing it for this one bit. And then also, the fun thing that we're also going to do, if I'm remembering correctly, I have another of this wonderful... Was this up here? Oh, I think it was this. Yeah, that's what it was. Again, to add even more variability, and look at this. Oh, I love this. Especially as we get to this curve point at the top, as you get to the top of the tree, the branches start to stick out more. And so I added another curve parameter to do that, basically. So you can see now they're all the same, but with this curve parameter, as we get to the top of the tree, they're very flat. As we get to the top, they start to angle more. They stop going from here, they start to angle more like a real pine tree or a fir, whatever, a real Christmas tree. You can see, like, look at that. It's beautiful. And again, if you have the first one set more, you can have it even more sparse as it goes up as well. And lastly, we're going to get to our first texturing. And that's also why I want to realize instances, so we have geometry to texture and just be all better. And this comes from this way of texturing these. We'll get into the I just have a material set here, so yeah, I plug it right in. A set material node, and then I have this material. I'll go over materials at the end, I believe. I want to stick onto my geometry nodes right now. But they're all they're all very similar. And again, they're from the part 2 of the default cubes wreath tutorial. You can just do a green shader, just a translucent mixed with a transparent to get kind of the pine needle colors. But if you want to make it a little more realistic, there's a couple things you can do. I'll explain, and then we'll get into the textures. I'll explain these parts again, but I have an index node right here, which we're going to plug into our value. We have point float, and then the geometry, the capture attribute node then just goes into our geometry. And this is going to be our attribute. That's how we do that. Oh, we got to plug in. I forgot. You got to go but. We actually got to use the geometry. We go but. And there we go. And now we have a group output. And if we go over to our geometry nodes, I have this, and I have an output attribute. I have one right here. Yeah. Yeah, output attributes. And then you can see I have I'm just gonna name this one. This one is what tree. I'll name this tree. This one's the same one as I have before. I have tree. So we're gonna put tree in there. This is tree. Awesome. Anyway. Yeah. So we're gonna set up to the next point. Again, I understand these more than I do the way the shaders and stuff work, and I'm just connecting all this. So we're just gonna move on. This is again very free flowing, just a way of how to make a Christmas tree. The next thing we're gonna do, we'll get to the tinsel last, and I have a star as well. We'll get to the most important bit, which is going to be baubles and lights. And I'm going to kind of breeze through these because it's the same process, pretty much. So for baubles, we're going to grab, we're not going to do anything separately now. Everything's going to be on this tree. So if we do baubles, we're going to take our mesh down here, our spiral, plug that into our distributing points on faces, set that to where I set my instance on points, and we're going to realize instances. We'll put it through another capture attribute, just because we're going to want that for the randomness. Basically, it will assign everything. We'll plug that attribute back in. Attribute number 2, we'll call this baubles. Awesome. And we're going to plug this index into the value. But again, it disappeared because we don't have any instances on it. So we are going to take a UV sphere and make that our instance. Look at all these beautiful spheres. Now we have a sphere full Christmas tree, but they're all too big. So first things first, we're going to take a shade smooth. Let's make them all smooth. Look at that beautiful thing. And now I have a scale node. And so this is what we're going to use to control the scale of everything. Rotation doesn't matter, anything like that. I have a random value for the scale, which look at that beauty. Now we have a whole bunch of random values. But basically we're going to also, that's not the scale vectors or something else. Sorry, forget I said that. This random value is what controls the scale of our spheres. And they're not intersecting with each other, you can see, because I have this distribute points and faces set to Poisson or whatever disk, which means I have a minimum distance that they can be, and I have that set to 0.3 meters, so no sphere is going to be closer than 0.3 meters of each other. And that's how we get all these beautiful spheres. Look at that. But you're going to see if I grab this join geometry node I have over here, because you can see we have our baubles, but no, our ornaments, but no Christmas tree. Our pine needles are all gone. That's because we're going to grab our pine needles, all the ones that have been instanced on the spiral, and join them. I like to put them first. Join them with the baubles. Look at this now. We have a whole bunch of these baubles nestled in this tree. But some of them, like these little ones, might get a little too nestled, which is fine. Like you could keep it like this. But I'm going to add a little bit of this set position node in the middle of it, which will say how far away from that base mesh the instance. And that's where the scale node comes in. Just, I believe for the offset is where I put that. Just to control that offset. Was it the offset or was it the position? It's not the position because they're all gone now. So is the offset. That's just the way I did it. You don't super need it depending on the look you want. It doesn't do a ton, but for whatever in my original tree, I thought I needed it. I think it changes some of them slightly. Gives you a little more control, at least it did me. That's like kind of optional. You can kind of just sit with the set position and everything you need for that. Again, this is just a vector scale. You can kind of make things, so like if I set this to 0.5, nothing happens. Love it. What if I set this to 5? Nothing happens. Okay, maybe you don't need this, but it was in here, so I'm going to keep it. Anyway, this offset, oh no, I think I had it. It was this. That's what it was. I'm silly. It was either for the offset. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. That's what it was. Look how that looks. Put in position. I'm just learning as you're learning. Yes, so this is instead, I'm using the normals of this should be interfaces of all these points and everything with this to put the scale of this offset, how far away they are, and it just makes them lean a little bit more outside. Of course, you get some that clip to the ground, so you don't need it if you like them kind of more nestled in there. But to make them look as they're kind of hanging off of the branches, that's a nice way to do it. So that way, they're not just kind of sticking out. They stick actually more to the shape of the beautiful cone that you've created. So those are the baubles. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Let's move on to lights. Again, same thing. We're going to take our base curve, put it right into another instance, distribute points on faces, which then those points go into an instance of points. We're going to realize those instances, and then that is going to go into our join geometry node. So now you'll see there's nothing because these instances have nothing, even though all the geometry's been joined. So what I have for this is I have a little cone, which will be our instances. We'll let those pop up. There we are. Look at the very small, kind of like gumdrops. And again, this is a place where you could do more realistic. If you wanted to, you could actually model a little Christmas light. You could also use spheres, more spheres for this. I liked cones just because Christmas lights are more or less a cone. And they kind of look gumdroppy in my final render, which I actually kind of enjoy. And again, we're going to use index. We're going to put this capture attribute through our set material node, so we'll see all these materials later. Again, the capture attribute is just we find the index, so that's the number of each part. So like 1, 2, 3, so that way we can do random colors and all that fun stuff later. And now we no longer need this realized instance geometry, as we have the one that goes through our lights material. And we can take this attribute, put it here, the third one pop over here, and we can call this lights. There we go. Lights. And now you can see though that all these are going to be aligned pointing up because that's how they spawn in. And they're also going to not be smooth, so we're going to shade them smooth like we did the spheres, just because they're supposed to be glass, and there we go. And we're going to do what we did before. We're going to, we have this align Euler to vector again, so we're going to take this rotation. Again, it's all the same stuff. We're just instancing a lot of stuff. So then we're going to do the rotation again. I have it set to Y. And again, I've kept this at 1 just because they're kind of all over the place, which is nice. I have this to Y, yes. So then they're all fun and dandy. And again, I have I want this along the normals though, so I'm going to put that down there. And this is because, where did it go? I have another set position node. Just so that they're not fully lost in there, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put this in the offset. And there we go. They pop out a little bit more. For this new tree, that might be a little too much. I'm actually maybe going to dumb this down a little smaller. But there we go. Wonderful. We got lights. Little Christmas lights. And that's the light setup. Pretty the same thing. This is all the same thing. So hopefully you're understanding that and you haven't just dulled off to sleep. And this is at least giving you ideas, even if it's not able, even if you're not able to follow along step by step right now, at least you're understanding these are all the same thing, just over and over with new kinds of geometry and stuff. So speaking of that, same thing basically we just did for the base Christmas tree, is making this tinsel right here. So you'll see, I'll actually just go straight to the normal one. If we grab, we're going to get another spiral set in here. So another spiral, look at that. It goes 0, and this one I have a little bit bigger start radius because I want it just outside the normal one, but it goes to just a little bit bigger. Same though, but then I have it a lot fewer rotations and a little shorter because I don't want it going all the way to the top. And then it's literally doing the same thing. We're going to curve to mesh. I'm going to set the curve radius. I have another circle here, again with a very small radius. And then this will be our new geometry. And that's our tinsel sphere. Tinsel stays the same thickness as it gets up, unlike the tree, so we don't need that curved parameter because that's not what tinsel does. I am going to, though, do my noise texture through a map range, again, smoother step to that radius of the set curve radius, just to give the tinsel a little bit of variation. Again, this isn't a huge difference, and there's not a bunch, but, anything helps to give a little more realism. So now we're going to distribute points and faces again. I got a whole bunch here. This is set to 50 for my density. And we're going to instance points. We're going to realize those instances, and we'll set it through our material. But what, dare say, are we instancing? Well, we're instancing our pine needles all the way over there, straight through. Look at this. These are our pine needles now. They're all straight up and down, so we again, I guess I didn't align Euler. That's funny. Either way, I'm going to take a factor. This is a noise texture, and this is going to be for our scale. I have it set 0.1 to 0.15 to give a little bit of an instance, and then I need an align Euler to vector. I don't know what happened to the one I had in here, but it's the same thing. We go rotation and rotation. And there we go. We got tinsel. I'm keeping it on X because my tree's on Y, so this will just give a little more variability. And I like the tinsel that has a little more sparseness to it. Makes it look like it goes in and out of the tree. But yeah, again, procedural. You can change it how you want to do it. And we have tinsel. Tinsel, not, you could randomize the color a bit, but since it's factory made and everything, I just need one material for it. And it's all gonna be the same color, and then it'll be the light and everything that determines how it looks. So we'll actually join that to all our other geometry and join that into our group output. And look at that. It's hard to tell because everything's gray. I don't want to go to colors just yet, but we have tinsel now wrapping around the tree. And it's just lovely, isn't it? Look at that. So, the last thing we're going to do before we move on to textures, I have two things down here. You can see I have star and trunk. Trunk's not necessary, depending on your render. That's why, and you can do more complicated with this. This trunk version is just a cone, just to give something in the middle, so that way you can't fully see through the tree. But you could also do a whole thing where you, again, make another spiral, a really tight spiral, and then instance a whole bunch of cones or cylinders, or even other spirals on that cone. Then they have cones coming off of them to make branches. Again, using your parameter, get them fewer and smaller at top, all that jazz. You could do that if you wanted to make it even more realistic. I don't need that, so I'm not doing that. But let's go star, because that's more fun. So if we take our group output down here, we'll actually take this join geometry is what we'll use. We just start with a wonderful little star up here, and I start with a curve. And you can't see it because it's down here. And you can see I've made it quite small. I've done some messing just to get the kind of star I like. Still 5 points, but the inner-outer radiuses have changed. We'll make this into a mesh. I use a square. You could use a circle if you wanted like a wire star. I wanted like a metal one that looks like it's a thin piece of metal or something. So I did this wonderful, I did a quadrilateral, I did a rectangle for my thickness for this star. And then I transformed it using a transform node and the geometry in the mesh to get it up to the top of my lovely little tree. But of course, a star doesn't just sit there. It needs, I'm going to set this to a shade smooth because I want it to be smooth, and also change the position of it. I'm going to join these together, and you'll see that I have added a cone to this. I also don't need that original star without the cone. You could all join this over here, but I like joining them together right here. So now I have that little cone. Again, doesn't need to be super realistic to me. I just need something to look, the star to look like it's sitting on top of something. This is another reason to have a trunk, possibly, is to have something come up here. Or you could just situate this farther down. Again, from far away, and if you're looking like slightly up at it, can't tell. So it just depends on what you want to use it for. And we'll put this material in here, and I have a star material that I've made. The last thing I do have is this vector rotate, which I don't think I actually end up using. It's just here for no reason. But if you wanted this, you could use it to rotate some things in the shape of the star. But, I mean, this transform node is fine for me. Either way, we're going to move on to the last bit, which is just a trunk, which is just a cone. I shaded it smooth, and I gave it a material. Very, very simple. And we'll plug that into our join geometry. And it should come up, and there we go. You can see we got a cone in here now. Just a little thing. Don't actually really need it. See, there we have a cone. Again, you could make this a spiral, realize it, and put a whole bunch of more points and everything. But you can see we have a nice little Christmas tree. Lovely. So let's look at materials now. Just because who doesn't love materials? And this is a very long tutorial already. So if you stuck around to this point, let's do lovely materials. I'm gonna just use basically duplicate the ones I used before for my other tree. You can see it already has all the materials set into it, but I am gonna update some things because it has different attributes. and I want to see how those change it. But you can see, look how lovely this is. We have a little bit of randomness from the lights for that attribute, but not from the baubles and everything. So if we actually go to the bauble attribute right here, this is our node. You can see I have a couple different colors. And that's because we're going to copy this and clear this out. And I'll make a new one, and I'll call that bauble 2. Alright, I'm going to delete this, and V, there we go. Same thing. And I am going to have to go to the geometry nodes now. And for our baubles, which remember are up here, nicely labeled, we'll just swap this to bauble 2. Lovely. So the reason why they didn't change is because, so you start with an attribute node. All right, I just have a principal BSDF to output, and we start with an attribute node. And so this is these. So if I type in baubles, there we go. Now we have some random numbers. Now it's choosing random numbers for each one of these baubles has a random number, the vertices and everything. I only know this number from default cubes tutorial on how to do the wreath because this is the method he uses. So again, I recommend watching those tutorials first, or if you're still confused about things in this tutorial, and then realizing like, oh, that's where this method comes from and everything. I use 482 vertices. In increments of 482, it will choose a new color for one of these baubles, which means each one gets a solid color. You can also mess with that. You can also add images if you want like snowflakes or something on them. And then just have a white noise texture. I forgot I can click now. So you can see if we just go to the first one, they're all bright white. And then if we add that value, nothing's yet. Now we write white noise texture, and they can see they all have different values. And then we add a color ramp to this to give them colors. I have this set to constant, and then I have just colors I like that I picked out and I thought worked well. And then I run them through Principal BSDF to give them a little roughness, make them metal, all of that stuff. So that's how you do the ornaments. Look at that. Look how beautiful that looks. And same thing, we're going to do the same thing for our lights. I'm going to copy this. We're going to name this actually lights 2. Just that way, we'll name this lights 2, and we'll name this tree 2. So I'm going to copy this again. We'll get rid of that. We'll make a new one in the slot. The slot doesn't matter because this is all for the cube that all these are being applied to. But the cube doesn't actually have a material being applied to it. Everything's being through the geometry node. So we just need places to make the materials, and then it doesn't matter where they actually are. We'll delete that. We'll paste in our lights, which nothing's changed because since I changed this to lights 2, now we should see just a minute. It should update, maybe not. What is going on? Oh, because I haven't changed the material in my geometry nodes. That is why. I again have to go to geometry nodes. Right there. Go to my lights, which are up here. And now you'll see if we change this to lights 2. I'm going to keep that here. So I'm going to need it for the trees. And now we go. There we go. Random little lights. And that's again because we have this, which is just saying each one of these has its own values for all the things. I've done 487 down here. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close to the right number. I don't know how to find that number. I've tried multiple things and researching stuff, so if somebody does, please tell me. I've just picked one that's close to 482, and 482 also worked pretty well. But this one, again, I'm not super picky about it, so this would just work most for me. And then we run that through a noise texture again to get those wonderful little bits and bobs. And then I have a color ramp here, which gives me all my Christmas colors. You can make these all one color, and then you wouldn't need to do this attribute and this randomness stuff if you wanted all white lights or something. But then I run it. You could also just run this through an emission shader, which will look better in Eevee, of course, but you can do passes for glow afterwards, which I might actually do this time. I didn't do last time. But I just then use a principle of BSDF to make the roughness down. I gave them a little bit of clear coat because it's supposed to be glass. And then I also use the color to determine the emission, and I bump that emission strength way up. Let's actually make this 60 for this one, which you can't really tell in material preview. We'll save. But in cycles, if we go through, you can see the emission doesn't super work in cycles, but you can tell they are glowing, and we'll be able to use that data and everything in compositing. You can add a little bit of a glow to them. Anyway, that's pretty nice. We'll get out of cycles now. Go back to material preview. And now, when we get out of lights, we'll make a new material after we go to our tree. We'll again copy all of this. We'll get out of here. And we'll make a new one, and we'll call this tree 2. And delete this. Paste in. Go over to our geometry nodes now. Go back to our tree down here. Right here. Make this to tree 2. And nothing will change, but that's because, I even have this. So my old one, it was leaf color, my old tree, but this is just going to be tree 2. But you see we got a little flash of what it looks like. The snap node again, giving everything a different number. These are planes, so 9 is the number for that. If we give the white noise texture, you'll see. Look at it, they're all variable. So let's just give some leaves a different color, a lighter shade, everything if you want to make them a little snow dusted, anything like that. I didn't do anything too crazy. You can see with my color ramp, they're pretty much the same color. On this one, I can actually go a little darker, I think. So we'll do that. We'll go just a tad darker, maybe a tad more yellow. Give that, and then we have this go through a translucent BSDF and a transparent BSDF mixed together in a mix shader to give our material output. And look at that. It's looking quite good. You can see just the randomness, and it is a spiral, so you might get some little weirdness. I don't know quite how to figure that out. And then we have my weird trunk texture, which I'm not going to recreate, but we'll go to. You could just use an image texture for this, or whatever it's called. I can't remember for life of me, an actual image texture. But I just did a weird noise texture-y thing because I didn't care if it looked realistic. I just wanted something brown with a couple bumps and noise and all that. I'm actually make this smaller. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Is this one? This one's the weird one. This wave texture. This looks real weird. But that's all right. It's what it is. Yeah. So doesn't matter. Anyway, you can see that's the trunk. This one is a little more sparse because I changed some things in the beginning. But yeah, that's essentially the tree. Oh, and then I guess I can go to my star is the very last texture I have, which I have right here. I just wanted something not super, that's just like solid gold. So BSDF, again, it's metallic. It's not super shiny. You could also add just use noise texture to make spots shiny and unshiny. But then I just used 2 wave textures to give these rings, and then just set them opposite of each other to give this cross-hatching pattern. Did some color ramps are the same, mix them together, and did a bump map. just to get a little bit of like, oh, there's like a texture etched into here, which again, if we go to our wonderful cycles render, you'll be able to see just gives it a little more kind of like, oh, something's going on there. Anyway, I'm going to bring back in my plane down there for my floor. And yeah, that's pretty much how to make a Christmas tree. I'm trying to think of this anything. Oh, the last thing I'm gonna do and show you is how you can make this fully procedural. So it already is, but again, if you were making a couple of these, just copy the node groups and the geometry nodes and everything. We have all of these. The reason we have 4D for all of these node textures is because it gives us this W factor, which is the seed. And so we can have a value node over here, and we can plug that in to any place there is a seed essentially. So that's going to be like right here. Anytime there's a distribute points on faces, we can plug that in. I missed it right there. We can plug that in. This is really going to crisscross over all of our things. But if we place this into all the seed values, all of our noise textures, that was the wrong place to put it. All of our noise textures, change this to 4D. All of our noise textures down here. And because basically this is just going to apply this one value to all of these randomized elements. So we can have completely randomized Christmas trees of everything, and you can keep just kind of messing around like Dark Souls character creator until you get one that you like. I believe that's almost all of them. I think there's one more up here. Yeah, there it is. And see, there's no more noise textures, I don't believe. Yes, okay. So let's see what happens when we do this. So if we go, and we're here, let's do 10. So give it a little time to think. There we go. We got a whole new tree. And we can go like 5. Give it a little time to think. Whole new tree. So if you don't like places of some of the baubles and stuff, I'll be like how many there are. Just do that. You can also change the seed individually on pieces if you like one thing and not the others. But this is a way just to do it completely randomly and get yourself a complete procedural tree. So I think the last thing I'm going to do before I call this tutorial and send you off to make your own trees is go into my camera. We're going to I have this camera set up, which same setup as I have as the renders I showed in the beginning, though it's a whole new tree now. And my render settings are not terrible. I have this set 10 minutes. We're just going to give this, this is 3.0 Blender. I'm just going to give this a max. I just want a real quick render, so I'm going to give this a max 30 seconds. And we're just going to render this boy, because I just want to do a little quick compositing just to see some things. I do have the ambient occlusion set in on my passes, because that will make this thing look a whole lot better. I have denoising off for the render, so I have that pass activated as well, but I don't need it. Compositing is not my strong suit, but I do want to do a little ambient occlusion in there, a little AO, and I also want to look at using that bloom. The bloom node to get a little bit more glow from these lights, because you can see they're casting light and it's kind of nice and twinkly, but I want to go a little bit more. Yes, so hopefully you can see this render in my capture as it's rendering. If not, there we go. And I do have some things already composited for my render, so it's out of there. So we're going to go to compositing. You can see I already have set up my render set up here. So I have an AO pass that's taken from my image. I have that image, and I have the AO being mixed with a multiply node over the image. I'm going to have that output. So you can see if we take away ambient occlusion, the ambient occlusion just makes it look real nice. I'm going to actually round that down. The ambient occlusion just makes it look real nice. And I like doing it in compositing because I have a little more control over it. But we are going to add a bloom, or a blur, my bad. No, that's not what I want. Is it just called glow? Glare, that's what it is. I want a glare, and we want, look at that. You can do, so this is, you can do streaks. If you want very Christmassy, like look how fun that is. And for all these numbers, we want to put this to high. Look how fun that is. You can use little streaks, boys. Fog glow is the simple one to get this little Christmassy glow. We want, again, a high. We'll go high and threshold. We can mix, the threshold's how pixels brighter, so again, you can kind of mess with what you want. Some of these aren't going to glow as much. We'll put it back down to 1. And maybe make the size 9. That's a nice size. Look how bright that is. That's so fun. That's maybe a little big. Maybe go down to 6. That's too few. We'll go back to the default. But you can have fun with this. Again, so glow is kind of nice. And you see there's some reflections off of some of these bits because some pixels are bright where the metal is reflecting. You can even do some stars. These little lights. Again, if you want to imitate cameras. But I like the glow. And so hopefully this, at least, even if it wasn't a step-by-step, even though it kind of was, follow along tutorial, at least this gave you some ideas on how to use geometry nodes to make a Christmas tree with the holidays coming up. Again, there's several things you can do to make it more photorealistic, such as actually modeling lights, modeling ornaments, modeling tinsel, modeling pine needles, and using those as instances as opposed to just flat planes and simple mesh geometry. But I didn't want to model anything, and I wanted everything to be procedural. And that idea and that concept and the basis for this method comes from Default Cube's Wreath tutorial, which again is should be in the iCard up at the top if you want to go and watch that, which I recommend, both parts. If anything didn't make sense to you in this tutorial, because I went kind of fast, or if you just want to know how to make a wreath. But I wanted to make a Christmas tree, because who doesn't want to make a Christmas tree at Christmas? It's fun. And made a Christmas tree, wanted to put some tinsel on it, wanted to do some ornaments, wanted to do some lights, wanted to do a star. Just because the more things on it, the better it kind of looks and the more Christmassy it is. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial on how to make a Christmas tree with using only geometry nodes in Blender, no modeling needed. And go forth, make Christmas trees, skinny, large, squat, with stars, without stars, with baubles, without baubles, with tinsel, without tinsel. Make a pink one, make a silver one, make an artificial looking one. Yeah, have a lot of fun with it. Hope this helped you. Hope you learned something. And yeah, catch you next time. Bye.